I'm Jeff Fritz with SoundStage.com, and I'm joined today by Bob Visintainer from Rhapsody.Audio in Brooklyn, New York. Bob, how are you today?
Great. How are you, Jeff?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Listen, I really appreciate you joining me today and telling us a little bit about Rhapsody and what you do up there in New York City. And really, that's my first question, actually. What is it like being a dealer in New York City? And also tell us a little bit about Rhapsody in general, the brand you carry, your store, a little bit about the history.
Sounds good. First of all, living and having an audio store in New York City is like living and having a store in a pinball machine. If you know what an old-fashioned pinball machine is like, bouncing around because besides the general activities of both living and having an audio store, which are challenges and ups and downs in general, but New York City throws a whole different level of challenges, I'd say, and especially over the last couple of years. I mean, the last 2 years with COVID and everything like that. I won't even go into all of that, but it's really something. The city, as all major cities across the U.S., are changing and have changed over the last couple of years, and New York City especially. So it's really something. At the same time, over the last 20 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about Rhapsody and how we started. But over the last 20 years that Rhapsody has been in business, New York has always been, a destination location for people from around the world. Not
Right.
only the U.S. and not only Rhapsody, of course, but Innovative Audio, Lyric, who no longer unfortunately exists, but Sound by Singer. All of these audio stores have always had visitors from around the U.S. and around the world. So there's a lot of opportunity along with the challenges that go with being in New York City. There's a level of excitement and there's a level of energy, and I think even dealing with manufacturers, they'd like to have their products represented in New York City versus maybe in Kansas, not to diminish Kansas or any other place, but New York City has a certain glow, or had a certain glow up until the glow's a little bit faded in a sense over the last 2 years. So you have to look at all that. And as a matter of fact, Rhapsody, just one of the big things, I have a couple things to discuss maybe here, that Rhapsody just moved out of the city after being in the same location for 20 years on 24th Street. We just moved about 3 weeks ago over to Brooklyn. And
Okay.
first stop on the subway line, so it's very close and it's very easy access. But part of the thinking was that the city maybe is a little rougher and a little different than it always has been, and we're more over in a residential, neighborhood type environment now, and kind of like it compared to what's going on over in the city. And so it was difficult though to give up a location that you have been in for 20 years and did a lot of business over a 20-year period. We started off in around 2000, 2001, and originally our name was, and our legal name is Avant-Garde Music and Cinema. I stumbled down to Georgia in around 2000 by the request of a gentleman named Jim Smith, who you probably know. And Jim Smith, who in my estimation was the person that put avant-garde on the map in the United States and helped put avant-garde on the map around the world. Nobody did anything more than I've seen a vendor doing or a distributor doing a long time for a line than Jim did. And I was lucky enough to go down there and hear what Jim had put together with his avant-garde duos. At that time, I was a duo customer. I already had duos, but I went down and listened to Jim, and I thought if I could bring that up to New York City, up to the New York area, I'd sell 1 million of them because it sounded so good. And Jim said it was his idea. He said, "Why don't you go get a loft up in New York City?" I was living in New Jersey at the time. He said, "Why don't you get a loft in New York City and bring the horns up?" So I thought that sounds good. I bought trios, duos, unos, and solos at the time with bass horns on the trios. And then for the next 15 years, sold avant-garde horns. I think we sold somewhere between 75 and 100 pair of horns of avant-gardes over the next 15 years, 4 or 5 pair a year. And so that was a lot of avant-garde spread. And I basically, for several years, followed Jim, went to the shows with him, and he was my mentor in bringing me up to speed. And I still look to him as one of the best in the industry. So, in fact, we were known as Avant-Garde Music and Cinema for 4 or 5 years, and then we were approached by Goldman, as well as MBL during the same year, around 2004 or 5. And having the name Avant-Garde didn't work for other vendors, and so we switched over to Rhapsody Music and Cinema at that time. And for the next 10 years, we were known as Rhapsody Music and Cinema. We represented Goldman, MBL, and I won't go through all the lines, but a lot of different lines.
Now, Bob, let me
And
break in. Let me break
yeah,
in and just ask you this one question. I know
yeah,
that Goldman, at least for a while, they were really into the home theater, the cinema, super high-end cinema systems. Is that still something that they do? Because I'm just not aware. And is that still something that you do?
yeah. So a good question, Jeff. And that is that I have not represented Goldman for the last 2 years now. And so what they're doing currently, I won't speak to, but especially from 2003 till 2007, until the market crashed in 2007, we sold, at that time, Rhapsody Music and Cinema, we sold close to $10 million Goldman systems that were all combination of drop-down projection screens tied to home automation, tied to Crestron, tied to Savant. Even at that time, it was mostly Crestron at that time. But we sold a lot of big-time systems. And I would say Goldman at that time, they had the Los Angeles house, which had a full-blown theater built into it. But a lot of times it was just freestanding Goldman systems, but always with video and tied into home automation. So they were doing a lot of that. And then 2007 till whatever, 2010 or 12, things got slow, and especially in that high end luxury market. And in the home theater, from my perspective, and I was going crazy with it, and Rhapsody, or at that time, Rhapsody Music and Cinema was going crazy with it, kind of stopped. It really just fell off, and we've kind of migrated to two-channel audio. And I remember back at that time saying two-channel audio was probably going to die, and it was going to be all big home theaters. I mean, I really felt like that. I remember telling people that, and so boy, was I wrong. Because I ended up then migrating more as the years went on, especially 2010 to 2015 to two-channel. And at this point now, get very few requests for home theaters. And I still have, networks. I don't have a home theater staff like I used to have, people that were directly connected with us. But in fact, Rhapsody now is pretty much audio. Every once in a while, somebody will have a projection, but video has pretty much become a commodity. I would say, though, that home automation and tying into a lot of the brownstones and large homes that we do business with, they have some type, either Savant usually or Crestron, that does security, lighting, shades and all of that. And so we do tie into those systems. And Goldman, as a matter of fact, still does that. They're capable of doing that. So I can't really speak to what they're doing over the last 2 years. They have a new distributor, and we migrated, and I'll talk a little bit about it, to the Mediterranean. We moved down from the Swiss area over to some of the Mediterranean companies that we now deal with.
Now,
Um,
you mentioned the new location in Brooklyn, and I understand that you have really expanded the number of listening spaces over your previous location. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in the new Rhapsody location?
yes, so two big things happened simultaneously. One, we did move over to Brooklyn, and we've only been here 3 weeks. We're still settling in. In our Manhattan location, we had one listening space. And if you've seen pictures of it, it was crowded. We had a lot of speakers in the room, although we made good sound and made a lot of sales and supported a lot of customers throughout the years in that space. So I have nothing negative to say about it, other than now going from one space at the Manhattan location to our Brooklyn location, we have 7 different listening spaces
Wow.
available. And so now, rather than moving speakers in and out, we have pretty much every set of speakers set against the wall with a system. And so it's a whole different environment. It's a challenge, and work getting all that set up. We'll be ready by September or October. And so that's one area that is happening right now, the Brooklyn area. The second is, this happened about 6 months ago. I had a customer in Chicago, and his name's Jerry. And I had sold Jerry a Pilium system, which I'll talk a little bit about the lines and how they relate to the Rhapsody listening rooms that I'll talk about here. And I had a customer, Jerry, who bought a Pilium electronic system from Greece through Rhapsody, as well as Alsavox speakers, Alsavox Botticellis. And we were talking, and I said, hey, Jerry, once you get your system set up, I have 2 or 3 people that have requested in the Chicago area to come in here, especially Alsavox along with Pilium. But they really want to hear the Alsavox speakers. And we start talking about it. And he said, sure, no problem. And just messing around, we said, you could be a Rhapsody listening room because there were 2 or 3 people interested. And so we just left it at that, nothing more. I mean, there wasn't going to be anything other than I was going to have some people come over and visit and listen once he was set up. And that day I was talking to Jacob, another associate person I know in Florida, who actually has 2 locations from prior audio life, one in Miami and West Palm Beach. And I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to have a Rhapsody listening room in Chicago. He said, I want to be a Rhapsody listening room. And so I said, well, I'm just doing this. And I said, well, I'll let you know if we do something like that. And I had no intention of this. And I think a day later, one of my customers in Dallas, Texas, who's been a 15-year customer, has a $500,000 or $600,000 condo system complete from a Ginga to the Kagura amplifiers and all the electronics in between. And he's been a long-term good customer. I was telling Chris down there, I said, hey, I'm going to do Rhapsody listening rooms in Chicago and down in Florida. Just kidding around. And he said, why'd you do that? He said, I'll open up a really big Rhapsody listening room in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I said, what? And we start talking, and he was very serious. But the other guys, we were just kind of going back and forth. Chris was very serious about it. And Chris has the capability, I would say, he has the space already, and he has the ability to be able to pull this off if he wanted to. And I found out after talking to him, he would really like to do it. I think 2 or 3 years before that, Chris and we talked a lot over the years, and I think he said something like, I could be Rhapsody South. I think he always wanted to do this. So okay. Then that's when it started. And then over the next month or 2, as I start developing the idea, one of my other customers in Palm Desert, California, I told him about it. He said, I want in. And there was my West Coast, lower California deal, Rhapsody listening room potential. And then I got a call from Bob Vineyard, who's very prominent on What's Best Forum as Bob Vin. And Bob is in Portland, Oregon, and Oregon City, actually, Oregon. And Bob said he also wanted it. And so before this was all over, it took him about a month or 2 to develop. We had a full plan with Rhapsody listening rooms planned for Oregon, Palm Desert, California, Chicago, Dallas, West Palm Beach, Miami, and then another one in Long Island. And along with the Brooklyn location. And so that it just so happened that all of these people, they're all long-term customers. I go to war with them. And none of them are doing this basically for the money. They all want to do it because they've all been to my place. They've all seen the lines that I carry. They all love them. They've all bought them. And they want to be like Rhapsody. And that's what they're going to be like. They're going to be Rhapsody.Audio listening rooms. And what the listening rooms will be, some will be in commercial locations, some are in their homes, but really nice setup rooms. And they will have our core products mostly. They will have the Pilium electronics from Greece, all solid state electronics, Alsavox from Spain, Desis from Italy, outside Rome, and Bayz Audio, B-A-Y-Z, the omnidirectional speakers from Hungary. And then we also sell Constellation from California in solid state electronics, and we sell WLA for lifestyle. A lot of people love the WLA Little Phantom speakers as well as the Expert Pro series. So we have that as a kind of a lifestyle product, and also Viger turntables from Italy. And okay. So most it's probably kind of a diverse lineup. And then the big name that I didn't mention, which is maybe the leading line and things that will go on this next year, is Magico. Rhapsody's been a Magico dealer for about 10 years now in the city. And about a year and a half ago now, I guess I remember when I saw the first announcement of the M9s come out. And I saw that and I thought, oh boy, $750,000 speakers. And I thought, I'm not going to mess with that. It was out of my comprehension at that time. Although I've sold a lot of speakers especially the big Goldman Apologues and the Epilogues. I've sold a lot of speakers and am capable of doing that, but I didn't see it. And then a couple months went by, or I can't remember, 6 months they went by, and all of a sudden I got my new A5s in. And I had A1s and A3s, or I had A3s, I think already. I think A1s came later. And I got the A5s, and I turned them on, and after a day, I said, what the heck is going on? I couldn't believe, and I have M series, I have all the other S's and everything. I couldn't believe what I heard with the A5s. And then I called Alon and talked to Alon and said, what's going on? Is my hearing going, wacko or what? He said, no, you're hearing it. He said the M9s and the A5s are the only two with the latest nanographing, and I call it crossing the chasm because they've been doing great drivers, Magico has for several years, but
Right.
just recently with this last iteration, something happened. And for me, when I heard what the A5s did, the transparency in the mid-range and the mid-bass was like something I've never heard off any speaker at any price. And within 2 days after I heard the A5s, I called Alon and Peter and said, I want M9s. And with not hearing M9s, I thought for 25,000, if this is what he did for 25,000, I want to hear the 750,000 version of this. And also thinking I'd be able to sell them. And the more we talked, I realized I'd be the only stocking U.S. dealer besides having them at the showroom out in Hayward, California.
Right.
Rhapsody would have a pair. And that was the first pair. And then once Chris down in Texas, we got more involved with talking about the Rhapsody Listening Rooms, Chris decided to also bring in a pair. And
Wow.
so we're going to have, I already have mine paid for that are coming to Brooklyn. And although I'll probably put the first pair that we get down in Dallas. Dallas is going to really be a hub just because he has a 22 by 32 foot room, pretty much the same size as a launch room. And so it's a perfect size. My rooms are I have a lot of rooms, but they're a little smaller. And so we'll probably put the M9s down there originally, and maybe, I don't know exactly when, maybe probably November, December timeframe of this year. Fingers crossed.
Well, I'll tell you, Bob, there's two things from all of the information you just gave us. First of all, I reviewed the A5 and I recently heard the M9 in California, and
Yep.
it's the A5 is a tremendous speaker. I don't know if you've had a chance to actually go to California and hear them
No,
yet,
I
but
haven't.
it is an amazing experience. It really is, and I
Yeah.
actually have a not a review because it's in Alone's listening room, but I do have an article on SoundStage Global all about the M9. So that's the first thing. So that's a hugely exciting that people will be able to hear that speaker in several locations
Right.
across the country. That's a treat. The second thing that I like about the Rhapsody listening room concept is, we're getting more and more email from readers that are buying sight unseen, sound unheard. They're just
Mm-hmm.
buying products, they're bringing them in. Hopefully, they like them. So, what you're doing just to get high end audio more accessible, more people are going to be able to hear these systems, not just the super systems with the M9s, but other products. The more the better. I think there's been, some of the high end dealers in the United States, there's been, a little bit of recession there. There's not as many. So, the fact that you're opening these Rhapsody listening rooms, I think for the
Yeah.
consumer is just a tremendous
Yeah.
advantage.
Well, thank you. And it's especially because it's not like going to hear a regular speaker, hearing big ribbon Alsavoxes. Most people haven't heard them. Also, Deesa's horn, open baffle, high efficiency. They haven't heard those in the Bays omnidirectional. They're very exotic kind of speakers. And you might hear them at a show, but not over the last couple of years without the shows. And I've sold, like I said, a lot of speakers over this last period of time, the COVID period of time. And in fact, what I realized was most of my sales are around the country. and people have been buying, like you said, sight unseen. So these listening rooms will not be taking orders. They're just going to be open. You set up an appointment, you go and listen, and then you order it off Rhapsody. We have support centers in Brooklyn, in Chicago, and San Francisco for any type of support for any of the lines that we carry. So the guys are just opening these up and spending a large amount of money, actually, and doing their rooms and getting them set up and making sure they'll be demonstrating, effectively.
That's fantastic. Well, you mentioned a bunch of the brands, and but you mentioned one I do want to hear a little bit more about, and then I have one follow-up question. The Pilium Electronics from Greece. Tell us a little bit about that line.
Yeah, it smacked me in the gobsmacked me in the right between the ears when I heard it in Greece. I heard it over in Munich. I go to Munich every year, not the last 2 years, of course, but used to go to Munich and heard it over there, and also heard from a friend, Reiner, who is a designer for Kaiser speakers. And Reiner had told me, he said it was the best solid state or electronics that he's ever heard. And I thought, that sounds strange. It's another electronics brand. But I ended up, based on what Reiner said, ordering one or two pieces, and I got them delivered. Took about 2 or 3 months to get them. I got them at my place over in 24th Street in Manhattan, and I listened for a while, and I loved it. It was like, it wasn't tubes, it wasn't solid state sounding. It just sounded like music, but that was my impression. And then I had a reviewer come over, and I won't go into the names here, but I had a reviewer come over, and he came to hear the Osavox, the Bays, and the Disa speakers. He just wanted to hear all three of them. And so he came over and he listened. We spent 2 or 3 hours. I switched, and I used Pilium Electronics, and we switched from all three speakers. And he loved all the speakers and all that. And then he drove home. And about an hour later, I got a call, and he said, "Bob," he said, "they were all running on the Pilium, right?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I want to buy your Pilium Electronics." He said, I came home and realized all three of those speakers were as good as anything I've ever heard." And he said, it must be the electronics, because they were all different. But he said the electronics. And that started it. All of a sudden, I realized I had something really special, and he's had a lot of gear, this person. And so then I started to sell it. And now I've sold somewhere between, I don't know, between 10 and 15 full sets over
Okay.
the last 2 years. And that they make a DAC called the Electra DAC, $40,000 DAC, so it's not inexpensive. They make two integrateds. They make 3 sets of monoblocks, 2 stereo amps, 2 different preamps. So a full line of electronics. No PhonoStage right yet, but probably maybe one on the drawing board. And probably I don't see a server right now, but because I use the Extreme. That's another brand I should have mentioned, actually. I was the first SoundStage Extreme dealer in the world, I think, and in the U.S. Specifically. And so I use the Extreme into the Electra DAC into my Pilium. Even the Leonidas, and they're integrated, is 275 pounds. So they're
Wow.
monsters. And the other thing about the Pilium, sounds like music. I don't need tubes. I don't need solid state. I just need the Pilium anymore for me. And the other thing, it runs dead. It runs AB, so it's not any class D, but in fact, it runs dead cool. It's
Okay.
massive heat sinks on it, and big and heavy and tremendous size capacitors, and a lot of output transistors, like 30 some output transistors, very, very meticulously crafted and engineered and assembled. And all of that results in, you can, after being on 48 hours, put your hand on it, and you have to look for the light to see if a light's on, because you don't know it's on, which is amazing, which I love for high powered, kind of gear. The only negative is it's heavy.
Right.
Everything they have is heavy, like in the 200-pound plus range. So
Right.
so anyway, other than that, so it's really special. It's not, and as a matter of fact, that I sent it out. I sent a full set, $300,000 worth of Pilium, out to Alon at Magico, and I liked it so much, and I was getting acceptance and realizing people liked it so much. I said to Alon, I said, "Give me a shot. Let me have you hear this." And he has access to a lot of different electronics, and he has the M9s will sound great with a lot of different electronics. But he put the Pilium gear in the four Hercules monoblocks and the Alexander preamp, and that's what he's using now as his demo
Yeah,
system.
that's exactly what I heard just a few weeks ago. In fact, that very gear that you just spoke of, and it
Yeah,
was, the sound. Obviously, it was out of this world. Well, you kind of just answered this question, Bob. But the last question that I have for you is, tell us about a recent listening experience, something that's just blown you away, something specific that you've heard, and whether it's gear or music, just tell us
yeah.
about something cool.
Yeah, I would say an interesting thing about my listening experience probably jumps back to with me moving. I was in it was a commercial building over on 24th Street in Manhattan for 20 years, and I built that room originally as a home theater, and I used absorption panels throughout the whole thing. I had two spaces at the time. I had one that was for the audio, where I had the avant-gardes and the Goldman system and MBLs, and then I built this room as a home theater room, very heavily absorbed. And eventually, I liked the room enough that I start moving equipment into it, and I gave up the other space. And so, for the next 15 years, I fought with that room because it was so heavily absorbed. I was always trying. I would try tweak after tweak of trying to always make it lively. Always trying to, I put different type of panels over the absorption because the absorption panels were kind of built in. I
Right.
could have done it. I would have had to do a complete reconstruction, and I wasn't into doing that at the time. And so I worked and worked, and I made pretty good sound. Like I said, for 20 years, made a living and strong business in New York City. And so it wasn't bad, except I moved to Brooklyn to all of these different space, four different rooms and seven different listening spaces. And in fact, I set my equipment down and get everything started to unpack in boxes. And I wanted to get just to see what it sounded like in these rooms. Now, this is a definitely unique location where I've moved into. The house was built in 1878. So it's like a
Wow.
fortress. It's like a fortress. It's large with heavy stone brick walls and I so but no treatment on the walls. I'm still waiting for some treatments that I have ordered, and without rugs. I got half of my rugs. The FedEx lost the rest of them, and so I'm waiting on the rest of the rugs. I bought these vintage rugs from Istanbul, Turkey, from the 70s. Kind of worn a little bit, but cool. And but FedEx is sending them over. I got half of them. The other half never showed up, so they're sending new ones. Anyway, so I have half of my no wall treatments and half of my flooring over hardwood floors, and I turn everything on in all these different rooms, four different rooms, and it sounds, I'd say, twice, maybe three times, a whole different experience than my other place that I thought sounded good.
Wow.
This is just like alive and clear, no echoes, you would think I thought I was going to have to work. I have boxes of tweaks that I used to use over in the other thing, and I have no desire to I'm almost afraid to bring them out because I'm afraid I'll get carried away and start doing things when in fact I don't need anything. It sounds wonderful and there's several rooms, and they all sound to me like amazing. So a lot of times, because I mean, face it, speakers are great and electronics are great, but and Jim Smith taught me this. I remember Jim Smith telling me this in 2000. I said, well, how do you get your sound? And he said, well, I get about 85% of my sound from the interface between the speakers in the room. And then
Yeah.
I get about 10% with my electronics and 5% with cables. And I thought he was crazy. And because at that time I was, buying preamps and all this to make better sound. And all speakers ever do is move back and forth real fast and move air in the room. And you're hearing your room. And so that, for whatever reason, I got lucky because I have a lot of, installations, and it's not always great. Sometimes you have to work with the room, but I just got lucky where I went from a room that I worked and worked and worked for 20 years, and it doesn't even come close what I had to what I have now by just plopping down and turning it on. Just luck of the draw.
Well, that's exciting, and I'm sure it really excites the viewers and all the SoundStage readers who live in the area that will be able to come in and hear some of the gear that you've talked about today in the new Rhapsody location. So, wow, that's just really cool. Well, Bob, hey, thank you
Yep.
so much for joining me today and filling us in on Rhapsody and the new Rhapsody listening rooms across the country and some of the gear that you've talked about. It's been really fantastic, and I really do appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, Jeff, very much. Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon.